Hello, I'm Catherine. Welcome to my studio. In today's video I'm going to show you several image transfer methods. I've been using these for quite a while now. I've dabbled with it over the years and I've had very hit and miss results. Now I'm not going to lie, you often will get hit and miss results because there's so many variables, but I think I've come up with some tips and tricks that will help with the process. So what I'm going to do, just starting from a simple image, and I love taking photos of bare branches in the winter. Sorry, the sun's coming through the window here, so I hope you can see it okay. And I did a short 5-minute video where I showed how I edit a photograph to get it good for transfer, and I'll link it up here. What you want is a good contrast. So black and white, lots of detail like this is a really good subject. And I'm going to show you how I do it with inkjet transfers using a jelly plate and with laser transfers, and I got all sorts of results. And I also used transfer paper as well, and I'll tell you how I got on with that, and I have put these all in a portfolio. And I'm also going to show you how I've done it on wood and using a method called a Thermofax, where you have a screen and you sort of screen print onto fabric. And although it's slightly niche, my last method is using my digital embroidery machine, and I know that not everybody's got one of those, but I'll just run through it because you do get amazing results. So I've managed to, using the same image, I've transferred it into several different colourways. Even doing a sort of, it got very abstract with this one because it sort of got blue on blue, which I do rather like. And then it led to this very eye-catching colourway, and I've quilted this and made it into a journal cover. And my next video I'm going to show you how I made the journal cover, and I'll show you how I made this portfolio, which is actually, you can take your papers in and out with these rings. So I'll show you how I did that, and I'll put some of the details of the materials I used below, but I'm also going to have a blog post on my website where I go into a bit more detail with everything, so you can have a look at that. With an inkjet transfer, you are actually transferring the ink from your piece of paper onto the plate, so it's a bit different from some of the other methods. Inevitably you're not going to get it quite as black because you're not going to get all the ink off the piece of paper, but what you'll find is that a jelly plate actually receives the ink without having to add any other medium. It's got sort of mineral oil in it, and I think maybe it's the oil that sort of absorbs some of the ink. You do have to rub it for quite a long time, as you can see, and I'm just having a look at it now, and it's not too bad, but I think I could do a bit more rubbing. Ideally, when you print your photo, you'd put your printer settings onto the best possible quality of ink. Unfortunately, my printer was playing up, as they so often do, so I couldn't get it quite as black as I wanted to. But I was still quite pleased that it worked. I mean, it looks quite sort of wishy-washy on the plate, but as you'll see, when I took it off with some paint, it gave a nice detailed design. Okay, I don't think it sort of shows on camera that well, but there is, as I say, there is actually quite a lot of detail on it. So I decided to use gesso as my layer to take off the print. It's an acrylic based one, so it works just like acrylic paint. It's just got a bit more sort of chalkiness to it. And I've been careful not to use too much because you get a better quality of transfer if you use quite a thin layer and just spread it out evenly. Don't put too much pressure on your brayer and you'll actually get a more even layer. What you want is to be able to still see the design through the layer of paint. That shows you've got about the right amount on, and you can just sort of make out the branches on here. So I'm just using regular cartridge paper and making sure there's good contact. And then I'm going to leave it with a weight on it for a few minutes. I just use a handy book. There's a nice tulip for you to look at. So this is a few minutes later. As you can see, I've got my cup of coffee. And I'll probably give it a last press just to make sure every bit's got contact. You actually have to give it quite a bit of pull because it really sticks to the plate, but you can see how it's picking up, it's leaving a little bit of residue on the plate, and you can clean that off with baby wipes. But actually, I don't think that's too bad because, okay, it's not very black, but you've got a nice amount of detail. And then I thought I'd see how it worked with doing it on fabric. So it was exactly the same process, but I used fabric medium, acrylic fabric medium, in order to take the design off the plate. And that came out rather nicely, I think. A bit more delicate. Now I'm using a laser printout, so you can either, if you've got a laser printer, use that, or what you want is toner, and it's the same thing that's used in a photocopier. Now this is a different technique because although you do it in the same way, you don't get a transfer from the ink itself. It acts as a resist, so when you put it on the paper, the white of the paper will pull up the paint, but where the ink is, it will resist it, and that's how you get your design. So I'm putting a thin, even coat of just black acrylic paint. And then you have to be quite delicate here. You want to apply pressure, but you do it with quite a light hand. And it's only by having a go yourself that you'll get to learn what this is. And sometimes you do it exactly the same and it will work, or you'll do it another time and it doesn't work. This isn't too bad. We've got quite a lot of detail. There is a bit of too much paint left in the bottom right hand corner, and I've got some bits on the edge that have been left as well, but there are ways of dealing with that. And again, I'm using the gesso as that seemed to work quite well for the inkjet. And although this is a resist, and with the inkjet it was actually transferring the ink itself, it's still the same process because with your layer of paint that you're putting on, that is what's going to peel off the first layer. So you just need to put a piece of paper on and again weigh it down and wait for it to completely dry. And this is coming off pretty well, especially at the beginning. You can see it's taking everything off. And I do have a little bit of a problem with some of the paper sticking there, which does sometimes happen because you want to get the paint thin, but not so thin that it dries too quickly. So that wasn't too bad for a first attempt, but now I'm going to have another go. And with the laser printouts, what I found was that if I passed the same piece of paper through twice, I'd get a much better result. Now this is a bit tricky depending on how your printer is, because it's hard to exactly line it up on some of them. You sort of have to move the bits that hold it in so that they're really kind of firmly in place. And occasionally it just didn't register exactly. But it depends what you're trying to achieve. I mean, you're never going to get crystal clear images like this. That's not what it's about. You're getting a sort of almost like an abstract version. So because I'm getting those extra bits, I've gone in with some masking tape just to lift some of the paint where I don't want it to transfer. You can sort of wipe it with a kitchen towel, but that can leave it looking a little bit smeary. And this time I'm going to transfer it to a piece of fabric, so I'm using the acrylic fabric medium. But it's exactly the same process. It tends to be a little bit wetter than just using acrylic paint. And the reason you would use that is because it keeps a nice sort of soft feel to the fabric. Because I do stitching as well, if I want to stitch into it later, it's a much more pleasant process if you use fabric medium. So I've already got these light cotton poplin squares that I've cut out and ironed in readiness. And I'm just trying to smooth it, not get too many wrinkles. It's quite hard not to get any at all. Now, although I'd left it quite a while, I don't think it was quite transferring that well. So I pulled up this corner here and realised that I could see there was still some paint left on the plate, so I decided to put it back down and leave it for a bit longer. You can see when I finally took it off that corner does look a little bit different. So that's why I decided to do another one to get a better version. Here's another one I did. I had my camera around the wrong way for some reason, and this one has come out quite a bit better. So this third type of transfer, I suppose isn't technically a transfer because you're not going directly from the print onto your substrate. But I've included it because you do actually make a screen from the same image. So again, you want a toner printout and you want a really good contrast. So this is the ideal sort of image. The way it works is a Thermofax is an old type of photocopier, and it works by heat. And what artists found, and I think a lot of tattoo artists use them actually, is that it will, if you use a toner on your piece of paper and put it through the machine, and you use this special mesh, it will melt away one layer of it, leaving the very fine mesh that you can push paint through or ink through. So you're in effect making your own kind of silk screen, but it's much easier than the other methods of doing it. Now, you don't have to take it to extremes and get a machine yourself, because there are several companies that you can buy them from. So you can buy their designs, or you can send in your own design and they'll make one for you and send it back ready to use. So you can see that's the sort of plasticky, filmy side. That's what will get melted. So you have to make sure you put it through the right way. And I also put it in a plastic sleeve to protect it. Now this can be a bit hit and miss as well, because you have different settings on the dial for the Thermofax, so you have to get it to go through at the right speed. If it goes through too quickly, it might not be enough time to burn the image. If it's too slowly, again, that might not work. So it's a bit of trial and error. So I'm just feeding it through. And as it makes contact, the light and the heat come on. And that's all there is to it. It's quite simple, really. So I just need to take it out of the protective sleeve. And I peel it off, and I don't know how well it shows on camera, but this one has taken pretty well. And then if you are getting one from a commercial company, they usually put them into a rigid frame, but I find it works fine just using duct tape, and actually I quite like the fact that it's not rigid and I can use it on, because you don't have to just use it on paper or fabric, you can use it on objects as well. So that's now ready to use. And some people use a sort of rubber squeegee to put the paint through. I think because I'm not using the rigid frames, I don't have a very good result with that, and I like to use these sort of foam brushes on a stick. So I'm just sort of pushing the paint through. And I tend to find that the first print or two might not be that good, but sort of once the screen's got charged up with the paint, you get much better results. So it's really good to have a sort of session and do several at a time. And the other thing to be careful with is that you don't want the paint to dry onto the screen. So as soon as you've finished, you need to give it a good rinse. And it's just such a brilliant way of just getting your own photographs. You can edit the photographs how you like. You can use lettering. You can, you could do a portrait. There's just so much potential with this. I love using them. So now I'm having a go with a couple of different transfer papers. There are lots of makes do them, and there seem to be two main ones. You get the ones that work with a sort of very fine plastic film, so you transfer that as well. It's usually called t-shirt transfer paper. Now, I don't really like those for t-shirts because I don't like that finish. So first of all, I tried a method that's supposed to work by transferring the ink itself, so a bit like how I did the inkjet paper for my own print at the beginning. And I followed the instructions. I looked it up. It said use a hard surface to iron on, so I'm using a wooden panel rather than using an ironing board. And I think I followed the instructions. And I have had the paper for a little while, so I don't know whether that had something to do with it. So I'm not going to say what the make is, but I just found the ones that you transfer, that were supposed to transfer the ink itself, didn't work very well. So this is my first attempt, and I ironed it for age. It said to do it for 3 to 4 minutes, and I must have done it 5 to 6 at least. I'm just checking there. I can see it's not very good. I'd put masking tape on just to hold it firm. But you can see, not very good at all, so I really wasn't impressed with that. So now I'm using the sort that works with a sort of plastic film, and I will put the details of that because that worked really well. So although I've got an ironing pad here, I have actually got a piece of plywood underneath, because again it said you want a really hard surface to iron on. And first of all, I'm ironing the fabric to get that really smooth. And I've printed out onto my piece of paper, and you just have to peel it off and then apply it. What you have to remember, which I didn't do the first time, made a bit of a mess of my iron, is that you do it with the image facing up, and then you use a piece of this paper came with it. It's a bit like parchment paper to protect your iron. And I watched a video about it, and you had to smooth it from one side to another. I've speeded this up because it would be very tedious to watch otherwise. And then you had to make sure you were covering every bit of the image and press down as firmly as you can. And I don't know how well it shows on camera, but this one has taken pretty well. I really like using wooden panels in my artwork, and I thought I'd show you how easy it is to do a transfer onto them. So I thought I'd use the laser paper technique. I'm just cleaning off my plate because there's a bit of ink left on it. And I thought for a change, instead of black and white, I'm going to do blue and white, and I'm using Payne's Grey, which is a really nice sort of slightly greeny blue, kind of teal-like. So I'm putting a thinnish, even coat on it. And I'm using a print that's gone twice through my laser printer. I'm getting quite good at lining it up, so it's pretty accurate. And as I said before, you just want to give it a nice sort of gentle touch, sort of feather touch. So you want to make sure the paper's making contact with the plate, but not apply too much pressure. So you can see how well that resist has worked. We've got a nice detailed design. And this is just a plywood panel. I'll link below where I got get them from, and I've already given it a couple of coats of gesso just to make it a nice ground to work on. And because of that, I just decided to carry on with the gesso and use that as my paint to pull the print. So this is a bit later, and obviously the first layer with the design is completely dry before I do this. If I did it in portrait, there'd be a lot of space around the branches, and I don't really like the look of that. I want the branches to go off the edge, so I thought if I do it on one side and I'll fill the rest of the space with something else. I often do this on these wooden panels. I build up lots of layers and then perhaps put a focal image on it at the end. I'll show you that process in another video. And I want to really weigh it down. So now I have a look at it and I realise it's a bit patchy. It's taken in some places, not others. So I decide to leave it for longer under the books. So now I've come back to it quite a long time later. I think I've been out in the garden, if my fingernails look a bit dirty. Been out in my greenhouse, potting on some seedlings. And that's just a piece of paper that I had the plate sitting on, but I took it off so you could see the result. So I start peeling off and it looks pretty good, but then I realise there's some areas that haven't transferred. So I decide to, I think about leave it for longer. Then I think I could use some acrylic medium, which is transparent, so it won't cover up anything I've already done. And that might be a solution to get the patches that haven't transferred to stick to the wood. So this is a method you can use if you have the same sort of issue. And what I was careful to do, I didn't take the plate completely off. As you can see here, I've peeled the sort of top part back, but the bottom is still in contact with the plate, so it's not going to move out of position. And I'm putting the medium directly onto the wood, whereas normally I'd put it onto the plate. And trying to get just the right amount so that it's not too wet. And once I've done the top half, then I could, as you can see, lift up the bottom half and do the same there. If you do end up with a print like this, all is not lost, because what I've sometimes done, if I haven't been able to make the print better, I have filled in those missing areas I usually use the Derwent Inktense pencils. You can get them very fine and they come in a wonderful range of colours. And then you can fill in the areas that you've missed, or you can use the same paint that you've used and a very fine paintbrush. I just don't really like working with small paintbrushes. You can fill the areas that have been missing, and overall nobody would ever notice. So there are always ways that you can use, or you can just use part of it in something else. Obviously it's a bit different on a wooden panel. If I had a complete disaster, I would just paint over it and, a couple of coats and use it for something else. So this is after some time, so I'm coming to have a look, see if that using the acrylic medium has worked. Now that's pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. But then I realise there's one area just now where it's left a bit of a hole. And so I decided just to have a go at that area. There are a few at the bottom, but they don't really bother me. Okay, let's see if that's worked. You can see I use several books to get really good pressure going there. Let's see, has that worked? Hooray, it has. So I'm pretty pleased with how this has worked out, and as I say, I'll just use that as part of this piece of artwork. It's just like the first step with several layers that will go on top. Now I must admit this last technique I'm going to show you is a bit niche, because I do realise that not everybody has a digital embroidery sewing machine. But I just thought I'll just whiz through it. I just thought you might be interested to see the process. What I really love about it is that you can do your own design. It comes with lots of standard designs, which often are a bit naff, but you can do exactly from a photograph, as all these other methods. You can transfer that into stitch. And the way you do it is, first of all, you do it with software, and you can upload your photograph and it will give you an approximation. The first one I didn't really like because it was very dense stitching, and that's not really what I like. So I did another version and manipulated it. You can spend hours on these things. And I used a different method. I think it's called monochrome linear. So it doesn't lay as many stitches down. And I really liked that. And then I thought, oh, I quite like the shape. It's looking quite abstract now. And I thought I'd do blue onto blue. And although you get a very different sort of look with it, I actually really liked how abstract it was. So it shows how you can take one image and then it can lead to all sorts of things. And for my final one, I thought I would just do quite a mad combination. But I have a purpose for this bit of fabric. I'm going to quilt the rest of it and make it into a quilted journal cover, which again I'll show you in the next video. And I used a sort of pinky purpley fabric with a luminescent orange thread. And actually I think this is my favourite one of all. So I hope you found lots of useful tips with that. Do ask any questions, and remember, in my next video I'm going to show you how I make these, which are a portfolio and a journal cover, and they both use methods that you can take your papers or your notebooks and put them in and take them out. You're not just fixed with them. So I hope you'll join me next time.